Alright, we're on to OPM 117, day 117, meditation from this day, June the 10th, originally written 10 years ago, and commemorated this day on the 2014 year 2014, and let's get sound going here. Yeah, alright. This is from chapter 8, eventually was published in Being and Learning, chapter 8, page 196 to 197. And as I wrote in my blog post, this is the writing that you can really feel the influence of Ewart Cousins, who was a professor I had at Fordham when I was an undergraduate. And I studied Plotinus, St. Augustine, Bonaventure, Anselm, all those sort of important late, ancient, early medieval philosophers / theologians. But Cousins was the one who introduced me to this idea of intra-religious dialogue, and was also the first person that I recall using in any serious way the word spirituality. And so to get more context for this, check out the blog where I talk about Cousins and the ecumenical spirit in which he was teaching, which was much more than interdenominational, but really, I guess, could be captured best in what he talked about when he talked about the mandala as being a symbol that one could meditate on to gather one into a place where one could understand that all spiritual traditions, is what he called religion, spiritual traditions, were like spokes on a wheel that were all leading to the single source that we could call God, or the Godhead. So with that in mind, I'll read the meditation that was very much an expression of that influence that Ewart Cousins had on me. We now see clear why the philosopher is both lover of learning and wisdom. To be lover of learning, lover of wisdom, is to be devoted to the Tao, to being, and thereby to heed the guiding directive to cultivate community, the being together of the many. To be devoted to learning is to be devoted to the cultivation of the dialogic community, which is the path of wisdom directed by the Tao. At the onset, we said one who properly teaches is a pointer, and we understood this description to indicate the opportunity to take up more fully what is meant when we say the lover of learning is the animated teacher, the mythopoetic speaker, and the intensely attentive listener. In our exploration of this pointer, we re-encountered Socrates, the philosopher-teacher par excellence, whom Heidegger called the purest thinker in the West. And in this encounter, we saw the important link emerge between the devotion to learning, this love of wisdom, and the uncompromising labor to cultivate a community based on love. We recall that Socrates' attempt to cultivate and worship love and bid others do the same was directed by Diotima's evocative teaching, her lore, that pointing towards the ineffable, which we, quote, find unanswerable, and which, quote, taught Socrates the philosophy of love, unquote, from the Symposium. For Socrates, Diotima's teaching, her guidance, was an offering, a gift he attempted to give others, and drawing them into his perplexity, his confusion, his uncertain ground. By drawing others into this open region, Socrates was conveying the directive offered by the appearance of the ineffable. The truth of this appearance, and the wisdom of being together, the wisdom of intersubjectivity that manifests in the diminishing of the self-enclosed cogito. The essence of the teaching is thus the pointing that indicates the incompletion of the self, the incompletion that shelters possibility, that preserves freedom, that spares initiation and improvisation. But indicating this incompletion also points to the field of beings as the fecund ground for the cultivation of peace. Peace is the ongoing completion of the self with the other, the emergence of intersubjectivity through the I-thou relation of poetic dialogue that we have called learning. And as we've said, teaching is nothing else than letting learning happen, the bearing and offering of the gift of teachability. To repeat what we said above, in letting learning happen, Socrates offered a gift, the same gift he received from Diotima. Quote, "This gentleman was the doctrine of Diotima. I was convinced, and in that conviction I would try to bring others to the same creed, and to convince them that if we are to make this gift our own, love will help our mortal nature more than all the world." Unquote from the symposium. Meditative thinking is thus the exercise that prepares for the labor of cultivating community. If the foundation of this community is built upon the work of painstaking listening, the hearing of the other that is the proper and authentic response to the tidings that announce the incompletion of the self, then the exercise that prepares one for this building is the practice of openness, of emptying, of destruction. This destruction is akin to the stretching and breaking of a muscle tissue that is necessary for the building up of more flexible and powerful muscles. That is necessary for the building up That is necessary for the building up of more flexible muscles, more powerful tendons and bones. But the preparatory exercise, if it is authentically preparatory, is indeed a destruction of the self-certain enclosed ego and the emergence of the incomplete, question-bearing learner. Yet this meditative practice is the painstaking listening to the gathering directive of the ineffable, the wisdom received in listening to the Word. And in this listening to the ineffable, this meditative practice that opens the self to the opening of openness, where the self is seized by the mystery of the unforeseen, which evokes wonder and awe. To be seized in this way is to be turned around and attuned to being's processual unfolding, and thereby to be claimed by this profound possibility identified in the most creative process. Thus, in the preparatory exercise of meditative practice, the learner emerges as the modality of one who is estranged, who is transported into the comportment of the questioning stand, which, quote, is ecstatic dwelling in the nearness of being. It is the guardianship that is the care for being, unquote from Heidegger. And this is precisely why the one devoted to learning is the one devoted to the Tao, to being. To be devoted to the Tao is to care for being. To care for being is to heed the call to cultivate community, to build the abode of peace and freedom, to seek from day to day to diminish doing in order to attend to others and allow all things to do their own doing. To enter into the location of learning is thus to take up the questioning, ecstatic stand and to be seized by the other and to be drawn out of the domestic security of calculative thinking. The philosopher's lover of learning and wisdom emerges in the devotion to the Tao, with the care for being, and with this, the practice of philosophy becomes experiential, the cultural event of being with others in poetic dwelling. The philosopher qual learner emerges as the dialogic being, and with the emergence of this modality of experiential philosophy, we witness the destruction of the solitary ego cogito and its representational cognition, the diminishing of the habitual habitat of calculative instrumental reason. Meditative thinking is the sparing of this simple awareness, this humility that is identified with the reception of the guiding directive of wisdom. But the freeing of humility is the difficult and strenuous exercise that is identified with the rigor of learning, of devoting oneself to learning from day to day, of listening to the evocative appeal of being. Heeding this call in the epoch of unilateralism is exceedingly difficult. And the difficulty is found in the very practice of meditative thinking itself, where doing is diminished and calculative thinking, the bearing down upon others, is deconstructed. Quote, "Because there is something simple to be thought in this thinking, it seems quite difficult to representational thought that has been transmitted as philosophy. But the difficulty is not a matter of indulging in a special sort of profundity and of building complicated concepts. Rather, it is concealed in the step back that lets thinking enter into questioning that experiences and lets the habitual opining of philosophy fall away." And that's a quote from Heidegger, which is a really powerful quotation. Again, I've been ending a lot of these meditations with these fragments from Heidegger, and I think they're very important, not only obviously for giving context for what I'm writing about, but also because of the form that they're written in. So I talked yesterday in my commentary about the form and content of Heidegger's later work that gives a lot of space to the writing. But here, in particular, talking about the movement into a different location with regard to thinking. And for me, as I've emphasized in this meditation, it's both a movement into a more global understanding of philosophy, as most inclusive of all traditions of first philosophy, and also through a kind of doctrine of love to the building of a community and a fellowship, a gathering together with others.